Good afternoon, everybody. This is Joe with Above the Tree Line, and thanks for joining us. Today we're talking about using Edelweiss Plus to balance your inventory. I put balance in quotes there on the slide because it's really, we can look at it as balance, or we can look at it as more like an optimization sort of thing. But either way, we're going to show you some tools that you can use within the analytics tools to kind of I guess the gist of it is to get rid of the dreck and bring in good stuff, like to put it as simply as possible. But just for those who don't know, our analytics tools are an add-on module, essentially, where your point of sale system sends us a nightly update, and that's basically just sales and inventory, and it's a month to date sort of thing. And all that information gets fed each morning into your analytics tools. And because it's a month to date thing, if you miss a day or two, it's not going to mess up the whole thing. So once you update again, then everything will be caught up. So we do have on our help site, which I'll show you at the end, we'll have compatible point of sale systems. Some are not compatible because they're not able to produce data feeds in the formats that we need and all that fun stuff. So just keep that in mind. And when we talk about the analytics stuff, so we have like a mountaineering thing, which I was actually just talking about with Adam, summiting mountains, which is weird. So side note, my colleague Adam is on is on the line as well, and he's going to be answering any questions that you have as they come up. If he can't, or if there's not time, then we'll make sure to catch your questions afterwards. But basically, if there's a little Q&A or questions part on your what's the word I'm looking for? Webinar tools there. They will, you can ask questions there and we'll be able to hook you up. But basically we have Basecamp and Summit, and the tools that we're talking about today are for Summit users. So basically the full subscription, the full meal deal will get you these tools, and there's lots of great stuff in there, as you'll see. The Basecamp version is essentially your data being fed into the comparable titles in Edelweiss. That's kind of the gist of it. I keep showing the slide because I like the quote and I like the idea of it. Essentially, as it says, if you can't measure, you can't improve it. If you don't know that something's wrong, you're not going to be able to fix it. It's kind of what it comes down to. And I like that idea just because we always have anecdotal evidence of what's happening in our bookstores, and that it may be true, or it may be, interaction that you had with a customer one time last week has colored your perception of your inventory, which happens as well. When I was a buyer, that happened to me. I would jump on what I thought was a trend, but it was just me talking to people every now and then. So taking that information, that anecdotal stuff, and what you hear from your staff and all that, and combining it with the hard data is really, really powerful and can only help. Basically, like, more information is always just a helpful thing. But today, really what we're talking about is workflow. So that's actually one of the things that I hear from people who don't use the analytics tools as much as they would like to, is just that there's a lot there. And you can open up the analytics tools and do everything if that's your thing, or you can go in with a very targeted idea of a task that you want to accomplish, which is the way I recommend it. A lot of times people will, who use the analytics tools a lot, will just keep it open all the time. And, as they're shelving books or talking to customers, they'll I haven't looked at the metaphysics section in a while, and then they'll go and add that filter to the analytics tools and take a look and just see what's going on. And as you're doing that, you just kind of get a really deep understanding of what's happening at your inventory. And usually, if you're the person doing the buying or the restocking, then you have that a really good idea anyways. But to take that information and compare it or enhance it with that hard data is a really powerful thing. And this is one of the main things I want to show you today is how to set a temporary filter and how to take advantage of that. It's just a part of the workflow. It's a really nice and easy thing, and I think you're going to really like it. And so lots of different tools available here. If you have questions, as always, you can email us at support@abovethetreeline.com, and someone, usually me or Adam, actually will answer that question. And otherwise, we do have help documents, which I'll show you again at the end, where to find them and such. Yeah, so we're going to dive right into the analytics tools and take a look and do a little analytics dance. That didn't make any sense, but I'm going to go with it. Analytics dance. All right, so this is a demo store that we have. Again, so lots and lots of different tools within Edelweiss. Publishers, catalogs, review copies, orders, etc. If you're an analytics subscriber, then you have the analytics link up here at the top. Also want to point out, if you are an analytics store but you don't have that link, a user administrator can grant you that. And I'll just want to make sure. User administrators, this is how you do that. So I'm going to look at Heather here. Heather does a lot of good stuff for us. So you can click on the person's name, click into privileges, click in here, and you can tell them, say that they're an analytics viewer, which gives them access to that that tab. And then analytics administrator is a thing that actually has ramifications that we're currently working on, like a deeper dive into things. And then the emailed report recipient is something that you would click on if you want them to receive the shelf report, which is a new thing that we are kind of beta testing right now. And you're going to hear more about that as the months go by. We're talking about it at Winter Institute, actually, I just found out today. So that's where the analytics tool comes from. And basically what we're talking about today is really going to be the 4 graphs that I talked about earlier. So there's the most popular, not yet released, stock analysis, and then the category performance comparison, which is my favorite graph, and is going to I'm going to use that as a jumping off point for things today. And it's what generates that temporary filter, actually. I didn't include the historical overview in that, but it is something that you're going to want to at least glance at. There's some numbers just right here, actually. This little area here will tell you everything you need to know, kind of at a very quick glance about what's happening in a category. Really, again, what we were talking about today is going to be that workflow thing where we're going to discover a portion of the inventory that is not doing well for whatever reason, whether overstocked or understocked, and then we're going to fix it. You have all the tools here that you need to do that, which is kind of the whole point of it all. Really, the easiest way to find what's happening within a particular category is going to be using the stock analysis here, or again, using that category performance comparison. So the stock analysis is going to take your entire inventory. So right now we have no filters set or anything. And we're looking at one particular store. Our demo store has 5 locations. We're just going to look at one today just to keep it nice and simple. So this is actually a pretty big store. We're looking at average inventory value of 1.6 million. That's going to be gross, but still that's grossly huge. That's a big inventory, a little too big, frankly, for its britches. You can tell that by the turn here of 1.8, which is pretty low. But what we're looking at is, 22% of the store really hasn't sold in a year or more, which is too long, frankly, especially when you're looking at $1.6 million in inventory. So you can go that way, and you can also go up to your save filters here up at the top, and you can select a preset genre filter or one of your point of sale filters and apply that, and it's going to apply to all the lanes. Keep in mind, though, that when you use a point of sale filter that's only for your store, then that means you're not going to be able to use the most popular and not yet released lanes, because your point of sale categories are not the industry standard, whereas BISAC is. So publishers use BISAC to classify their titles. Like, for example, you may have an entire section of titles devoted to cactus beer, and you have like all 2 books in the world about that. I don't even know if that's a thing. Whereas somebody else may have those same books, but they're in a cooking beverages section or something like that. And so there's no cohesiveness among your peers about how their titles are classified. And so again, with these market comparison lanes here, you do need to use BISAC or these genre filters. So hopefully that makes sense. But you'll see if I select a point of sale filter here, which is 600, the store is crazy. We're going to use kids' board books. So when you select a filter, it's going to repopulate all these lanes here. Some calculations happening. You can see here, as it says, custom categories are not applicable for this analysis. And so that's what I was just talking about. But you can use your stock analysis and see that among your kids' board book section, there is 15% of those are stale. It could probably very easily go away. That stale measurement is based on a shelf days measurement, which I'll show you here. So shelf days takes the number of copies on hand multiplied by days since last activity. So if you have 1 copy that hasn't sold in a year, then that shelf days measurement is going to be 365. So that's what this number here would represent. Whereas if you have 2 copies and it hasn't sold in over a year, then you're looking more at the 720 range. So basically those titles that have multiple copies on hand are weighted a little bit heavier in that measurement. And essentially that is because you made a higher investment in that title. And so it's a little bit more crucial that it sells, basically. My daughter loves Ladybug Girl, and I do too. She's awesome. The illustrations in those are great. Anyways, somebody should hand sell that book. But that's what we're looking at here. So these are titles that haven't sold, haven't moved in a long time, and can probably just go away, frankly. But we can also scroll down here and look at the historical overview and see within the last 12 months, average inventory 13,000, sales of 39,000, and turns of about 3. So this category is actually doing okay. It's if you're hitting 3 or so on turns, then it's a relatively healthy category. But like with most things, you can always do better. And in this case, getting rid of titles that have been sitting for 605 days with a stack of 5 copies makes sense. So that's kind of how you use the save filters there to measure a particular point of sale category. And you can just go hop in there and bop through and use recently used categories, or just pop in and pick one of your point of sale categories. The genre filters are actually pretty nice and easy. If you can look and say, show me, there is actually a board book thing. Show me board books here using that the BISAC classification there. And then you're going to be able to use the most popular titles and the not yet released titles. So you can not only see titles that should go away here in the stock analysis, but also titles that you could bring in that you're missing. For example, there's 2 books here about Michelle Obama that the store is not carrying. They could be. And other stores, those are coming out soon, sorry. But they don't have those on order, and they could, and apparently other stores think they're going to do pretty good. But you can also see among the most popular titles, those books that you're missing as well. So this is one pathway. You go and look at a particular category, in the stock analysis, see how it's doing, and then scroll up and see what you can do, not only to remove those books, but also to bring in stuff to replace those books. Now, you don't have to do a one-to-one, return and replace sort of thing. There's room to breathe generally in a section in your store. You can always phase books out. There's of course a finite amount of space, so at some point you have to stop buying books if you just can't shelve anymore. Usually your staff lets you know when that's happening. But just keep in mind, like when you say you return 30 books, you don't have to bring 30 books in. One of the great awful truths of being a book buyer running a bookstore is that the books quite literally never stop coming. I mean, just, there's always new stuff to come in, always, always, always. And so in a sense, your inventory can be like, your store is breathing, I guess. So, it breathes in new titles and breathes out either what's being sold, or you breathe out the excess, the stuff that people, as it turns out, don't actually want to buy. I do know some stores or some buyers who see that, they bring in books that people don't want. They see that as a failure, which I don't necessarily understand. Like I get it, but also like you just present them with books and they don't have to buy them, of course. But what happens though is it's a lot of times the buyer's like, screw you guys. This is a great book, so I'm going to keep it here, and you're going to buy it eventually. Somebody's going to come in 10 years and be so excited that they found this book. And I've actually heard a buyer say that precise thing, which is very frustrating. They went out of business. So there's that. It just got dark in here. But that is a thing that I have seen happen just in the years that I've been doing this, is that people can get really stubborn and too connected to the books that they buy because they can't be wrong about something. But that's kind of a silly thing. So get that out of your head. But what we're going to do here now, I'm going to actually jump down into the category performance comparison. So I am going to be jumping around between these lanes just because they're all kind of tied together pretty nicely. So we have the category performance comparison. Again, one of my favorites. You have options here. You can look at BISAC categories. So it's taking your entire inventory and looking at it through kind of a kaleidoscope lens of all the BISAC categories. And the BISAC is cool because there's a lot of sub-genres within each of these classifications. So like for cooking, we can look at cooking, but we can also look at international cooking and celebrity chef and beverages and special method cooking and all that kind of stuff. So you can take what you've bought and really parse it out and dive deep into what's happening within your inventory. You can also look at your point of sale categories. Now, the one issue with that is that your point of sale categories are not cascaded. There's no hierarchy within those. And so you're not going to be able to, dive into your fiction section and look at mystery and sci-fi because those are all just separate categories, which is fine in its own way. But also if you select one of these point of sale categories, which the store has over 600. So you can, if you select one of these, it creates that temporary filter that we talked about. And then you're not going to be able to use the most popular and not yet released because those are those custom categories that only you use essentially. So with that in mind, I do like using the BISAC here because it just makes it a little more flexible, and you can kind of get lost in there if you really want to, if you have that kind of time. So for example, I'm going to use the cooking category that we talked about. So if we click into cooking, you can see up at the top, we've created a temporary filter for BISAC cooking. We'll let that load. So when you do this, it changes, this temporary filter applies to all the lanes on the page. And then you can see that it portions it out according to specific BISAC categories too. So regional and ethnic in this store are overstocked. And so if we want to take a look at that, you click in there again, and it's actually going to parse, it's going to explode out regional and ethnic, and you're going to see like here, French, Mexican, American on down the list. So you can really dive in and see, okay, that kind of book is overstocked at my store, but what exactly is overstocked? And so in this way, perhaps the buyer here is pretty sure that people want to learn how to employ French techniques to their kitchen. And maybe they do, but clearly not in the way that, or in the quantities that we're looking at here. That was really confusing to say. Sorry if that was didn't make much sense. But again, so we're looking at regional and ethnic stuff, and we can dive in and see what's missing. So titles that we could be bringing in. This was an overstocked category that we looked at here, and so you could come in here and say, show me everything that's in this type of title that I don't actually need in my store. People clearly just don't want them. Maybe they used to. This one was always popular, but it hasn't sold in quite some time. So you can go from there, and then you can view titles in grid. And once you have this list, you can look and see a little bit more information here. So like this Greek cookery, which actually I've looked at this book and it's actually pretty great. But you can see that very, very few people in this market are stocking or selling that book. It is from 2010, but basically this has been on the shelf for a long time. So basically this one could go away, and we'll just say that everything on this list could go away. So we're going to go to other actions, select all, which is just 84 items, not too bad. And then you can export to file. And then, so all these available templates here, you're going to have all of your point of sale categories that you might have access to, and also any custom exports that you created for yourself. Most people are just going to have a few. This is my account, so there's a lot of test stuff here. But this E+ Analytics format is going to dump this grid that we're looking at with all this information in their own columns. So really highly sortable and searchable and all that kind of stuff once you send it to Excel. And then you can use that list as a return pull list. Delete stuff off it if there's things that you want to keep, etc. So we found a bunch of titles to get rid of. Then we can move up here and say, here's titles that we don't have. Out of 100 titles, there are 33 that the store doesn't have that their peers are doing well with. Now keep in mind, right now we are looking at the top 100 titles across the indie trade market. So the indie trade market are all the stores that use analytics, basically all your super smart peers. So you can change the market here. So if you if you want to see what's selling in the UK, you can do that, or what libraries are circulating well. But you can also look at your specific regional if you want. If you want to see just what Northern California is doing, and extend this out a little bit. So it just gives you a little more focused look at the titles that might be more regionally relevant to you. So if these are titles that you might want to bring in, if we look at Japanese here, if you click on here, you can get more information about the title. You can see peer data, which is going to show you, this is anonymous, so you're going to be able to see, which stores. Now this is all going to be West because we're looking at Northern California retailers here. But you can see basically what your peers are doing with the title. Some, in the last 12 months, 4 copies of this have been sold, 3 here, 3 there. So you can kind of get a deeper idea of what is happening with a particular title. If you want to place this on an order, just click in orders and you can select an order here. that you want to add it to, and then you just, just like you're used to. Probably don't want that many, but and then you can add a category here and all that kind of stuff. So you can place an order on the fly like so, or what I think is easiest actually is if we take these titles and if these are just ones that we've come across, we want to take a look at them. We don't need to do that right now necessarily. We're just kind of looking for stuff that might fill in some gaps. So you can go to other actions, select all, and from here you can either add to a collection or add to a tag. I like the tag thing. It's just nice and easy and quick. So we'll say missing titles. And then we can actually, once we go back to tags, I said back to tags, but we haven't been there yet. Sorry. But then you just go and find your tags. These are the ones that we just tagged here, missing titles. And then you can treat this just like a catalog. I think I got a little click happy there, sorry. All right, so here we would just select an order, whatever relevant order we have going. I just created this Ingram order before we started here. And then you can order as you go and see which titles you think make the most sense for you to bring in. And you have the usual sorts of information available to you, the content and comps and all that kind of stuff. So that's, to me, that would be the easiest way to go through a list and make sure that there's titles that you want to bring in, stuff that maybe doesn't seem like it'll work for you, that kind of stuff. All right, so back to, I'm going to bump down into cooking again, just because it's a nice and easy sort of thing to look at. So, for example, for courses and dishes, we can see this lands in the neutral area, meaning that it's not necessarily overstocked or understocked. As a larger group, it's doing okay, but we can still dive in and see, like comparatively speaking, desserts are a little overstocked, which is a little bit funny. So the one thing about this category performance comparison graph is that it takes all of the categories that are present and compares them to each other. So it's not comparing your the performance of these categories to some arbitrary ideal that we just made up. It's comparing your categories to each other. So comparatively speaking, the desserts is one of the bigger categories and one of the lower turning categories. So we can actually dive into that, select desserts. And so desserts doesn't have a subgenre within the BISAC categories. So when I selected that, it just changed the temporary filter up here. And we can see, dessert titles that we're missing, some that are coming out soon, but also more importantly, again, things that could maybe go away since this is a slightly overstocked category, again, comparatively speaking. So you can really dive in that way and kind of see little bits and pieces of stuff to return and to see what's going on. We can see, again, for example, that the turns for dessert titles at the store are just over 1, and the sales are pretty small. Like it actually, if the $2,500 in inventory doesn't really justify, or the $2,700 in sales doesn't justify the $2,500 in inventory, I would think. But again, so this is always a funny thing that you'll look at a category and you'll see that there are, it's a relatively overstocked category, but they're missing relatively popular books. And when we really start diving deep down into really specific categories like this, it takes a little bit less for a title to show up on the bestseller list, right? Because we're looking at a smaller selection of titles. Well, let's look at this French Patisserie, which looks delicious. So it's been sold in 19% of stores. It's on hand in 8% and on order in 3%. So not a huge amount of activity, but enough to get it to bump onto this list of the 100 most popular titles. And keep in mind when we're talking about the most popular, and we are talking about just in Northern California as well, which makes it even smaller. So keep in mind that that measurement is based on not only sales but also an on-hand percentage. So it's if one store is selling the heck out of a book, it's not going to throw off the entire graph. A certain baseline number of stores have to also have it in stock for it to rise to the top and also to be selling it. So to clear that temporary filter and kind of start over again, you just click that and everything will reset here, and you essentially kind of rinse and repeat. But again, as you're going through here, I'm going to switch over to the point of sale just to kind of give you an idea of how to use that. So like I mentioned earlier, this store has a lot of categories. So it takes a minute for that to fill in. These numbers here represent the number of categories that fall into the overstocked area here. And then the yellow here are titles, or are categories that are relatively understocked. So they have high turns but low inventory levels. It's like we can see kids beginner cooking, for example. We can click into that and see, relatively speaking, turns of 2 get it up into that level here. But we can pretty quickly see here titles that could go away, which in this case, 24 titles, there's 3 that aren't doing well, but everything else is doing relatively well here. There's quite a few, 5 on order. So that category is doing pretty good, but this may be a growth opportunity. If this is something that people are interested in, then it doesn't hurt to bring in maybe a couple more books. And to do that, I would find, beginner cooking. I would want to set a save filter for that, or jump into the Bizak cooking category to find some titles there. But if we're looking at the very overstocked stuff, we can see Westerns, for example. So pretty easy. We can jump up here and look and see that there's 165 titles in the Western section of the store. 31 are stale, could probably go away. That's relatively easy to do. A lot of these are going to be Louis, who just wrote a ton of books. But you could also pretty easily find books to take the place of those if you wanted to. In this case, I would probably just return those 31 books and see how it affects your turns and all that kind of stuff, because the turns here are pretty low. So this is probably a category that people aren't terribly interested in and don't necessarily need 165 titles. So when we're talking about balancing your inventory or optimizing it, that's what we're talking about. So you go in and you find those categories that are maybe struggling a little bit, and you then have the tools to go ahead and fix those. You scroll up and find things to return, and then find things to go ahead and order. I'm going to jump back into the buys that here. You can see there's other stuff here. If you want to look at Dewey classifications, you can do that. You want to bang your head against the wall and do that. BISAC is better, basically. So it can be a good way to get lost for a while, especially if you're the buyer at your store, then you're pretty intimately connected to your inventory and you understand space constraints and foot traffic in your store and that kind of stuff. So using that information when it comes to does this category actually need to be as big as it is, or is there can we move stuff around a little bit, not all the time because your customers will get mad, but I remember at the bookstore I worked at, we did that with a few categories. There was one category that was Enneagrams. It's a personality test, and our turns in that category were ridiculously big, like 25 turns. And we did some research and found out that there were some therapists locally who were recommending those books for whatever reason. But it was small. There's not that many Enneagram books out there. I don't even know if that's still a thing at the store, but it was. And so it was a relatively small section that we could move around. So we would actually move it to different parts of the store, and we could watch here and see those categories that we're now next to the high turning category bump up. Again, that's not something that you want to do all the time because your customers will get upset if they can't find stuff that they're used to finding. But if you move it a smaller category like that closer to like a metaphysics or self-help or something like that, then you'll likely see a bump in those categories too. So you can use the success of one category to beef up the success of another one and raise the water level. It's a horrible metaphor, but I think you know what I mean. So yeah, it's fun to be able to do that and then track your success. And we do have the shelf reports that we're sending out, and you guys will be seeing that if you haven't already relatively soon. But that's what the whole thing is based around, is performance of particular genres of books and tracking that performance. And hopefully you get the report and you see issues and you want to fix them because you care about your store, and then you can go back later on in a few months and see how those changes that you did have affected your inventory and turns and profitability and all that kind of stuff, which is what it's all about. So that's basically what we have today. I did promise to show you, if I push the right button here, there we go, the help documents for all this stuff as analytics-help.edelweiss.plus. And basically each lane has its own set of instructions, basically. And the essential knowledge actually works through lots of different stuff. That's where you'll find these recorded webinars that we're doing. And also the compatible point of sale systems. You'll see a list there. And then a suggested schedule of analytics tasks, which I kind of like. It's a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, yearly sort of analysis of what tools you can use or should be using and when. So again, like people will open this up and they'll scroll down and be like, oh my gosh, like I don't even know where to start here, which makes total sense. There's just a ton of information. But if you go in with a very specific task, it just kind of makes everything a little bit easier and you'll see how everything ties in together, and you're able to find those problem areas and then fix those problem areas pretty quickly. All right. So again, that's what we have for today. And if you do have support at abovethetreeline.com is your friend, or the the help documents here should be able to answer most of what you might have. All right, thanks guys for joining today, and have fun diving in.